Okay.
Hi, Jehan.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Thanks. Fine, thank you.
For those of you joining us, I have Jehan Aloysius here, who's a playwright, a director, performer, and the head of Center Stage Productions. And he is on the Gratiaen Trust shortlist for 2020 with his stage play, Mind Games. Now, we're going to chat about his stage play, Mind Games, over here today. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And thank you, Jehan, for joining us as well on this live. Jehan, before we kick off the live, I want to ask you one thing. How has travel
Yeah,
restrictions affected you? How have you survived the past month?
it hasn't been easy. Um, I live alone, so my apartment has become something of a cell. But I focus all my energy on writing and my music, and I've got an amazing bunch of friends who keep in touch through WhatsApp, and we have virtual parties and things like that. So that keeps me sane.
Oh, excellent. That's good. That is actually good because sometimes just pushing through this during this time period can take a toll on us emotionally.
Yeah.
So, Jen, let's focus on your stage play, Mind Games. I remember when Lloyd sent me the short list of people, I was like, oh, I need to speak to Jehan because it's Mind Games and it's a quite interesting premise what your screenplay is all about. I wanted to tell us a little bit about Mind Games.
Right. So, Mind Games is something of a psychological thriller. It's a play about that follows a woman who's battling mental illness and patriarchy in a family that has a dark secret. Uh, and most families have secrets, but the problem with secrets is that they can become malignant and become like a cancer and can begin to affect relationships. So. Uh, I've always wanted to write something about mental illness because I write from my own experience, and I wanted to write something that spoke about the darker side of our minds, if you like. I, the darker but more creative side as well. There's a very thin line between genius and the other side, if you like. So we as writers constantly grapple between these two sides when we're writing, and we try to make sense of it all when we're looking at the world and putting it down in our writing as poetry or as plays in an abstract or realistic form. So that's a little bit about Mind Games. Would you like me to explain the plot, or shall we go into the next question?
We can go into the plot, but before we go into that, I do want to ask you what
Yeah,
inspired you to write Mind Games. I know you said it was based
yeah,
off real people in your life.
yeah. As I said before, I do write from my personal experience, and Mind Games was the protagonist, Joyce, was based on two very real people in my life, two people from my family, and we find this protagonist in one of the darker moments in her life when she's in a manic state where she's really, physically as well as emotionally, in a state of constant conflict and outbursts. And I did want to try and make sense of it all because very few people see this. I mean, people from the outside, if they're not within the family or within or a close member or a friend of someone, they look at people who battle mental illness in a very different way. And I think it was really important for me as a playwright to talk about this character and to bring the reality, bring the humanity, bring the personality of this individual rather than just the condition. People tend to see the condition and stigmatize that in society. Unfortunately, even now, I wrote the play many years ago, and I've been revising it and reworking it and things like that. But uh, uh, we still have to come to that point where we can openly discuss mental illness without it being something that we are ashamed of. It afflicts more people than you may choose to admit or believe. But it is something that really needs to be discussed.
Absolutely, Jehan. That's why I think your screenplay is something it is quite, because you wrote it 20 years ago. So 20 years ago, people didn't view mental illness the way they view it today, right? Especially in Southeast Asian countries, right? We are still a little bit behind on normalizing mental illness and saying, like, you know what, this is an actual disease. 20 years ago and now, you said you did a lot of rewrites when it came to your play. Have you seen what are the rewrites that you incorporated into it?
Well, since I originally wrote it, there was a great deal that happened with very individuals that I based my characterization on. And I myself went through a pretty dark period in my life, and I experienced firsthand some of these elements in the script. But I also benefited, and the script benefited a great deal from interviews with scholars, as well as discussions with those who are battling this mental health issue as well. I wouldn't say that there's a huge change in the last 20 years. Certainly in the last 50 years, or the last 100 years, there's been a change. But even 20 years ago, we were studying the psychology of, in psychology, we were studying mental illness in Sri Lanka, and the fact that 12 rituals, for example, the kind of pseudo-religious demonic rituals that are done in certain areas outside Colombo, or even within Colombo, if you like. But certainly to those who are afflicted by a spirit or possession or something like that, because most people would prefer to say that they are that a family member is afflicted by a demon from outside or whatever, rather than accepting the fact that they need tablets or therapy or something like that. But there is in the last 20 years a great deal more accessible research on mental illness, and the fact that people are talking about it openly. People admit to battling these personal demons and overcoming them. I unfortunately, many of my friends, several, committed suicide. Unfortunately, because they were in the darker realm and they didn't have the kind of support system they should have had and could have had. And I believe that being open about discussing this and seeking help is important. We can't fight these internal battles on our own. And sometimes it's just a matter of medication or recalibrating medication or therapy, or really speaking to someone and having a support system that really helps people to continue and to function in society, and not to be called the Pissu or Pissu Danny or something like that, like one of the characters in one of my plays talks about, or in this play talks about. This character, Joyce, is in a constant battle because of society's perception of her condition and also her creativity. And the patriarchal forces tend to use her mental illness as an excuse to demonize her, to belittle her, to even for a husband, as she believes, to have an affair, and just call it her pissu or her madness, if you like, and to get away with it. So there is that. She's victimized doubly because of her gender as well as the mental condition in society, and that is important. And so in the last 20 years, I think, to answer your question, I mean, I may have rambled a bit. Some things haven't changed much, but some things definitely have. But I'm very glad that because of social media, people are more open to encouraging others to talk about it and admitting their own darkness and their own battles. That's important.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot more people are open about it. For example, you especially writing this screenplay, incorporating real people in your life and real experiences you have also gone through. Now, Mind Games is not just about mental health, right? There are lots of other plot points you listed. There's infidelity, there's trigger warnings to anyone listening in. There's also death of a loved one in Mind Games. What other plot points can we see when it comes to this screenplay?
Well, there is domestic violence, domestic sexual abuse, and also, as I mentioned before, this ongoing battle between Joyce and her husband, and the internalized patriarchy that her mother-in-law has, as well as the patriarchy that her husband tends to extend, that she battled even as a child with her father and her own brother. So this character, so um, there are various themes, but I think the feminist theme is one of the strongest themes that I think, next to mental illness, that is one of the one of the aspects that I was hoping to grapple with. She is a character that tends to be inspired by um, creative women who also battle mental illness, such as Virginia Woolf, Sylvia Plath. Um, she's also very outspoken as a feminist, in a kind of old school feminism, a kind of Gillian Greer kind of angry kind of feminism as well, in her outbursts towards her husband, because she feels that she really has to physically, emotionally fight back within that house. And the fact is that she's trapped within this domestic sphere of the house, even in this backward time of the 1960s to 70s where the play is set. So unlike the romantic heroines that were trapped in the architecture of those brooding houses, you wouldn't find my character Joyce finding the kind of uh, uh, damsel in distress being her heroine, but actually Bertha Mason, the kind of mad woman in the attic, is almost a hero for her. So she sees a kind of heroic quality in the fact that this woman uh, burns the house down in Jane Eyre. So this character, Joyce, really helped me to give a voice, a very strong feminist voice. And in many of my plays, not just Mind Games, but in The Ritual, in Stormy Weather, in several other plays that are yet to be performed, like Venus United, which is all females, and about women's empowerment. I try to write very strong female characters because back in the 1990s, early 2000s, when I was writing some of my darker plays and serious plays, before I went into more commercial plays, um, uh, many actresses would come up to me and say, Jehan, can you write me a play with a strong female character? Because all these meaty roles are for men, all these meaty roles, even the Shakespearean characters, even the females are played by men at that time. So can you write these characters? And so in Ritual, in Stormy Weather, in Mind Games, in Venus United, you find these very strong female characters really finding a voice for themselves. Maybe not all of them are as outspoken as Joyce is, but Joyce certainly, because she's regarded as Pissu or whatever, she feels that she can safely say what she wants to, and not be told that it is, she shouldn't be speaking like that as a woman, and that's not her place, and that kind of stuff. So she's able to subvert the authority and the kind of domination that she feels within her home because of the internalized patriarchy, even of her mother-in-law, who is a woman, but she kind of, she conforms to the kind of point of view that her own son and her own father, and that kind of attitude. So, yeah, so that's a little bit about that. I don't know. Am I rambling? I tend to talk a lot.
We actually have a question from Lloyd. He says, where does Jehan find inspiration for the characters in his writing? Is it a release of dark energy on his part?
Well, writing is catharsis sometimes, but well, most of the time. But I think the characters, the people, we as writers are like sponges. We're like greedy sponges. We absorb the characters, personalities, the stories that we come into contact with. I find myself even driving out of Colombo, or when I travel, I constantly have a notebook, and I really absorb these even unusual names or stories and things like that. But I really need to feel passionate about something if I'm writing it. And even what may be regarded as a frivolous genre as musical theater has to be something real. So even and something that I feel I can make a change by performing on a stage. I believe that it is important because we are as writers, we are the scribes of our times. So if through writing about ragging in rag or some of my new works talking about sexuality, talking about women's empowerment, those can really at least, I mean, it's not that you're going to be transformed like this by watching it, but it's the fact that you sit in the audience and then you go away from the theater and the play doesn't end there. I don't want people to just consume. I don't want to just for them to focus on their meal and where are we going and what are we going to do, are we going partying. No, I want them to talk about it. I want them to be sometimes disturbed. I want them to interrogate, to interpret, and to interact with what is going on stage. I know it's a big ask, and an audience may feel a little bit wary about it, but I sometimes don't give them a very neat ending in a play. That's because the audience has to complete that ending in the discussions that they have. And some people message me and say 3 days later or a week later, my gosh, this play is still in my mind. I mean, we're still talking about it. And I'm very happy about that because I feel that I'm not really written just some kind of play that people will just consume. I do have to say that I do write comedies as well as like theater, because we have to, even Shakespeare did it, and most writers did it, Peter Sheffer and everyone, because you have to find a way to, balance things out, and we also, to fund serious work, and many people or sponsors will fund original writing, unfortunately. All of my original plays, my theater troupe celebrates 20 years this year of existence, and we've only done original works, but every time we've done an original play, we never have a sponsor. It's only the second time we do it because then we've got articles and reviews and everything. So these are some of the things that I consider when I'm writing a new play and when I'm inspired to write a new play. So we take a lot from the people we meet. They're shameless sponges.
Jehan, something you said struck a chord with me. You said you had a lot of female actors coming to you and saying, write us a meaty role, give us a meaty role. I mean, it's 2021. Even in movies that come out of Hollywood, we still see females used as plot points for male characters. 80% of the time is that. Half the time, directors, producers don't put their money on female-driven movies because they don't know if they're going to do well commercially, right? Now, you did this 20 years ago. Did you think of all this when you were writing the play? Okay, I'm going to write about a strong female protagonist who's a feminist, whose creativity is demonized by the male patriarchy. Is this going to be perceived well? Is this going to do well? Will my audience like it? Did all those concerns come to you?
Okay, so most of my dark writing and most plays that even have been shortlisted for the Gratiaen, if you like, were written many years ago when I really didn't write through with an audience in mind. I was writing because I really wanted to say something, and I was writing, I wasn't thinking of commercial success. Some of these plays obviously had to be reworked with structure and balance and things like that. I'm still trying to stage one of my other plays that was shortlisted for the Gratiaen in 2020, but 2000. That's 20 years ago. A play of mine called When the Fan Stops. It's a very difficult play, and I've tried to stage it about 5 or 6 times over the last 20 years, but it's so deep and so heavy that I have to rediscover myself, my identity, the person I was 20 years ago. I'm not that same person. I'm not the same director, I'm not the same writer, I'm not the same individual. So there was a lot of me actually trying to figure out what I was reading, what I was passionate about, what I was questioning, because those plays that I wrote, including this one, really were a little bit bolder than some of the plays that I then started writing later on, which were more commercial. But it doesn't mean that I don't write that way anymore. When I did a reality show, I went back to my old form of writing because, I mean, since then I studied the Royal Court Theatre, I studied playwriting, I studied direction, I studied acting and things like that. So I found the rules that I could then break knowing the rules, whereas in the early stages, I really wrote without any rules. Really, there were no rules at all. There was no who's going to play this role, who's the audience, who am I going to find a sponsor, are they going to be shocked by when they read this? But they have been studied over the last 20 years. Some of these plays that have never been performed even, they have been studied, and people have been doing them for their elocution exams and things like that, the speeches and monologues. But I do feel that even to stage them now, even mind games, to stage it now, it may be a niche audience. It may be, because there are darker themes as well. It doesn't mean that it's a horror story, but they are very serious issues, and I hope that the writing of it balances things. I hope as a writer I've matured enough to balance things, but yeah, so that I think there are two personalities. There was Jehan Aloysius that I was 20 years ago, and the writer, director, and full-time theatre practitioner I am right now, who has to really think about, can I fill the audience at least, or can I even find a smaller venue to fill the audience? And whatever. I'm not trying to earn a buck. You can't earn a buck for the theatre, but I do want an audience to see it, and I feel very upset if I don't have that audience really watching all the hard work, because we put a great deal of work into creating original work. Remember, when we do original work, the writing, the script, the costumes, the music, even the publicity and everything, choreography, everything is created. It is not duplicated. It is not from a YouTube video. It is not a replica of something else. So audiences also need to appreciate that. It is not easy to write theatre, because when we write theatre, we are thinking in terms of, I don't know if I'm skipping your questions, but it is, we have to think in terms of dialogue, which is not easy. So, unlike writing different forms.
So that's the difference in a screenplay and the rest, and the other books that they're up for the Gratiaen Trust as well. Because when you write a book, you write the scenery, you set the whole stage when you're writing a book. But when you're writing a screenplay, you can't basically be very descriptive when you're setting the stage, right? Usually it's just dialogue.
Yeah. So all of the poetry, the metaphor, the nuance, subtlety, the imagery, all of that has to come through the dialogue, and at the same time, the dialogue has to sound natural, and has to sound natural as a Lankan English kind of dialect. It can't sound like something that wouldn't naturally be spoken by someone at the time of the context we were writing it. I was writing the 60s, 70s, so it's more, there's less code mixing, there's a lot more good English in it. But nowadays we speak, there's much more code mixing, code switching into the single language. There's a lot, so it's important, because I as many writers have done in the last 30 years in Sri Lanka also, we try to, there were few in the last 20 years, but more so in the last few years. But to write Lankan English and not write it as humor and not write it as a joke. It's very easy to put a good English, whatever, and a little bit of a single word and something on you. What are you doing? And you do all of that, get a laugh. But to say something serious, to say something important, to say something that has substance, and to do that with the Lankan English dialect, that is important. So my play Ritual also did the same. There was a backlash back then. Also people wrote and said, my gosh, that had a lot of singular in it and all that. But that's an ongoing discussion. And I studied psycholinguistics in the University of Colombo. My dissertation was on psycholinguistics, about understanding the Lankan second language speaker, and the fact that we have all these hang-ups, the colonial hang-up, and the hangovers, if you like, of the colonial era, and the fact that we are trying to reclaim and make good Lankan English into a rule-governed entity and not a bastardization of British standard English. So that is also important, because you have to think in terms of language, in terms of whatever, even writing dialogue, and we can't really write long descriptive passages because you can't really perform those on stage. You sometimes have to say, so-and-so discovered in a room, that's it. And then bang, through the dialogue, and I'm not alone in doing that. From Shakespeare, who said, so foul and fair lay I have not seen, or is it the morning lark, or, or whatever. That's how through language and poetry, we were able to really talk about the location, the time of day, and everything. And I don't like to depend on technical things like lighting and sets and painted sets for my plays. I do a lot of my plays with just scaffolding and just two actors on the stage. So I don't believe in just putting loading the stage with a lot of things in order to tell a story. The characters and the actors and the dialogue needs to tell the story. So that's what I try to do.
Okay, excellent. Now, my next question was, now, it's been 20 years since you wrote this play. How does it feel that you're up for you're shortlisted for the Gratiaen Trust Prize 20 years after you wrote Mind Games?
Well, it is a definite honor. It is the most prestigious award for English writing in Sri Lanka, and I am really humbled to be shortlisted. And as I said, right now I think the play has come as far as it should, or could not should, but perhaps has come as far as it could. But my cup is full. I'm definitely very happy and thrilled to have been that the judges gave this opportunity to a playwright and for Mind Games, a play that is very, very special to me, for it to be to come into discussion and for audiences to get a little bit excited maybe before I stage it sometime soon. So I would like to stage it soon. I've been doing readings with very talented readers and actors, which really informed the new writing as well, and the workshops and the discussions that I did. So I'm really humbled by this, and I'm really happy right now.
That's good. I mean, it is a prestigious prize, and this is your third time up for a Gratiaen Trust Prize. You know what they say, Jehan? Third time's the charm.
I hope it does happen. It would be a dream come true. I know my mother would be more pleased. I mean, not more pleased, but she would be as pleased as I am because she is my biggest cheerleader and harshest critic. If she doesn't like a script or one of my plays, she'll tell me even on opening night, I didn't like that, or that script is not good. So, but she really, from the time I was a teenager, she really has been really encouraging me to write, and I know that it would be her. She would be as thrilled as I am, almost as if she won the award if I were to win. But we'll see. We'll see how things go. And it's that's the thing. We submit this. We don't write for awards. We write for initially I write to get it out of my system because I really have to get it out. Otherwise, we keep it bottled up and it'll come out in a Freudian sense, in deviance in some way. But so I write like that, and then later on we rewrite and almost like the id coming out, and then the super ego and the ego adjusting things so that then it can be more a script that people can access a little bit easier. But then we have to also think about commercial, whether audiences will accept it and it can run and will fill the houses also, even if it is a niche audience. So there are all these other things that we think about, but who knows? I am still writing, and I'm writing every day. I'm writing new plays and new scripts. So I think, let's see what happens.
Good luck, Jehan. I really do hope you win. Also, actually, everyone who's been nominated is excellent, and this is, like I said, third time could be the charm. As we wrap up this interview, we did get one, before we wrap up this interview, we got one question from one of our viewers who said, when are you going to come back to Gujarat? I think that will make more sense to you than me.
Yeah. So most of my plays, as I said, they travel outside Sri Lanka to other countries. And we've traveled with my plays, like reality show, Stormy Weather, Tirumasantisdi. And for the last 10 years, I think we've been traveling, and we've been selected to represent Sri Lanka for the Asia's largest festival and the Theatre Olympics. So I think we did Gujarat sometime in last decade, and we haven't traveled in the last 2 years. I'm so upset because of COVID. But we do have plays that we want to take across because we write original work. We have an interest from overseas as well. I'm really thrilled that there are people who have seen our plays and appreciate that and have seen our work overseas who are interested in that. And that really, I think that has made my day. That's probably the best thing that happened in this interview, other than meeting you. So that's lovely. Thank you.
Oh. Also, like you said, wrapping up the interview, I know the theater crowd has, and the entertainment crowd has definitely gone through a tough time period in the past 1.5 years. I just want to know, when can we see the next Jehan Aloysius? Maybe Mind Games. I would love to see Mind Games on stage.
Well,
When can we?
before Mind Games, before Mind Games, and I do want to stage that soon, play soon, I would like to take any comments and advice from the judges as well when I'm working on the final draft, going into a rehearsal draft. But definitely, we're working on my play Venus United, which is a three-hander, three women, three strong women, women's empowerment, and it's a play I'm very, very, very excited about. And it has some of that bold, the younger Jehan also in it. And it's a musical. So I think audiences can really look forward to that. And another play, When the Fan Stops, which was, as I said, shortlisted 20 years ago, but I am working on developing it, and I've been working with readers right now, and I'm getting excited about it because I think I finally have cracked it. That play is a very difficult play. It's a riddle. It's an allegory. So it's been a lot of discovery and discussion, and 3-hour Zoom sessions with my performers, and I like to work with because it's a cerebral experience and it's a cerebral play. So I'm hoping to stage that as well. So hopefully, please stay safe and be safe so that we can get through this, so that we can get to the theaters, even on a small scale, even socially distanced, and really perform, because we're dying to perform. We're really, we as theater people, we exist because of an audience. Without an audience, an actor, a director, we don't exist. That's the only reason we exist. And so we really live off that, and not just financially, but we really live off that because that is why we create. And that's what I'm passionate about. So I'm trying to stay positive by writing, and I hope that we can get through this so that we can meet our audiences again. And, so look forward to seeing you as well there. Really lovely talking to you. Thank you so much for those questions.
Thank you so much, Jehan, for joining us and for sharing Mind Games with us. Guys, if you want to check out the Gratiaen Trust 2020 prize giving, it is on the 2nd of July at 7 p.m. on the Gratiaen Trust Facebook page. So do check that out and see who's going to win it this time. Jehan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Bye-bye. Thank you to everyone who was listening. Blessings to all.